sounded to me that that a lot of the Regents were talking about going to this model.
I wonder if you thought of it.
I don't know, but anyway. Is that how you took it? Howard?
Well, I believe it seems like there's a movement statewide to go a model that sets a level of tuition when a student enters the institution, and there's some ability to guarantee that tuition rate would stay the same for a period of time, assuming the student continues to make progress toward a degree and maintains a certain grade point average, things like that. I believe there's one institution already that has a program set up like that. So, and it seemed like everybody's considering some form of that, and so that's present in I think in this. In terms of the single rate, I'm not sure that I heard anybody that had really settled in on something like that, but certainly there was a lot of discussion about tuition and the level of tuition relative to current levels and the stress that's on all the institutions statewide because of the state funding formula and that sort of thing. So, I think we're in the early stages of this tuition discussion, and this is good information to see at this point in time. So I look forward to hearing it.
So I want to share a conversation that we had also with that I had with President Jim Freeze from New Mexico Highlands, and it was at the legislature that we had this discussion. But he asked me, of course, if I felt that the model would be adopted. And I told him that I wasn't sure that, of course, that was all subject to region approval. And his comments to me were, if you guys do it, the rest of us will do it too. It just makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's the first item that we're going to talk about. So the single rate tuition model, you have a handout in your packet that I sent you also via email a few days ago. But the model is pretty simple. We've talked about it for a long time, and it's combining the tuition and general fees to create a one single dollar amount rate that would be used as a multiplier for credit hours. So essentially what we're doing is taking the total cost of attendance for a full-time student, which is $2,030. You have a little diagram in your handout, okay? We have $2,030 divided by 12, right? You get $170. So that's how many credit hours is a full-time student has to take in order to be considered full-time. So we're looking at that rate of $170. You take your general fees plus your tuition and you divide it by 12 credit hours and you get $170. Now that'll basically take care of all of the tuition and fees, but it does not include all of the course-specific fees. Now the institution generates $277,000 a year in course-specific fees, okay, on top of general fees and tuition. So I want to share with you an expansion to the proposal, the handout you have now, and how that came about. So we've been presenting this. More than 70 students have had a presentation about the model, and we've surveyed them, and they support the model. They like its simplicity. They feel that it helps them to better understand how much it's going to cost them to attend, etc. And we've also presented it to the Student Senate, and I believe the President of the Senate, Ariadne, when she gets here, will be able to talk about their support of the model. Now we presented to the President's Advisory Group, and we got some really good feedback from them. So I know you all wanted kind of a little summary of the cons, the pros and cons. So the cons is, at a glance, it can suggest a tuition increase. And that's how some people, of course, have already tried to propose this model. Those who, who want a reason to say something bad about what we're doing are going to say, you're raising tuition, but we're not. It's a simple math problem. You take 2030, you divide it by 12, and you get 170. That's what they're paying now anyway. It's just that you don't enumerate all of the fees. And one of the cons is, it's not necessarily a con, but students want to understand where it's going. So one of the recommendations on the bottom is we can still show them the distribution of that funding. For example, when you all receive a property bill, you see where every single dollar of your property bill is going. Education, some of it's going to this, some of it's going to healthcare, the hospital, etc. So those are the basic cons that we've seen consistently. The pros are, it reduces confusion on, I don't know, my language is getting cut off here. It reduces confusion on the student bills. Okay, so we pulled sample bills for students who are taking 3, 6, 9, and 15 hours. And these bills have at least 13 different charges on each of them, okay, for each different fees, either general, course specific, and then the tuition. And another pro is it simplifies the process for determining the cost of attendance. So if you want to understand how much it costs, you basically just have to use that number and multiply it by the number of credit hours, okay? So in all of these presentations that we've given, we've received, of course, some recommendations. And coming specifically from the President's Advisory Group is increase the rate so that there are no more fees at all, including course-specific, registration, or transcript fees, okay? Well, we've done some work and some research on that, and like I shared earlier, the college generates $277,000 a year in fees. Well, if you take that and divide it by 2, okay, you get, of course, half of that, which is about 138.5. Well, if you divide that by the number of credit hours we generate, it happens to be about $10. So if you were to go from 170 to 180, all right, you would be able to generate that 277, and it would still be cheaper for students. Now, I'll give you an example. Every single student that's declaring an AA or BA or BS degree has to take at least 2 lab sciences, 2 lab sciences. And our lab science fees are $75 per lab, which means that every single student at a minimum is going to pay $150 in course-specific fees, okay? So if you add that extra $10 to their cost per credit hour, okay, they'll still save money, or it'll balance out for them, because over time they're going to have to pay that $150 anyway. Okay, so one of the recommendations is 170 will get you all the general fees. 180 per credit hour will basically get you all of the fees recovered. Okay. The next recommendation was show them on the bill somewhere, students, the distribution of the fees. And we can do that because Domingo, Vice President Sanchez, and I have talked, and our commitment is we always want to be able to isolate the tuition and fees behind, the accounting of tuition and fees. And that's for a couple reasons. One is so that we know what tuition is generating or what fees are generating. Secondly is so that we can show students or anybody else who asks where it's going. But lastly, some people ask the question, well, what happens if this doesn't work? And if it doesn't work, what we basically do is undo it. So some people ask, well, what happens if this doesn't work? Well, my response to them is, if we see that it doesn't work, and there's overwhelming distaste for this, just go back to the way it was. Okay? It's that simple. Okay? Now, those are the 3 reasons why we would want to still be able to visually demonstrate the difference in these. And then lastly, of course, given one of the major cons is we would have to market the simplicity, okay? Because some people will purposefully say, look at what they're doing, they're raising tuition. But the truth is, what we're doing is we're simplifying tuition fees. We're making it easier for students to understand how they're being charged. So we would, of course, execute a campaign because what we'd be selling is the simplicity by which fees and tuition is rolled up into a single number that helps students identify the cost of attendance. So one of the other comments, Madam President, that the board had made is, has this been done before? Where is it happening? Is it working? Well, going back to the story about Jim Freeze, something very similar happened in Kentucky going back to 2001. Okay, so Western Kentucky University said, we should do this. This is what we need to be doing. Back in 2001, they said, we're going to do this. We're going to go into a single rate model, and they've been doing it ever since, and it's been working for them. Well, 2 months later, Louisville, which is 3 times the size, said, we want to do the same thing too. So Louisville in Kentucky also decided, we're going to do the same thing too. Sometime after that, and the date is yet to be determined, Oakland University in Chicago said, we need to do the single rate as well. It makes a lot of sense. So they adopted a single rate. The only fees they charge on top of their single rate is for meal plans and parking, okay? They also have a differential rate, meaning that they have 3 different single rates, one for 1 and 200 level, one for 3 and 400 level, and then one for graduate work, okay? So these are all public four-year institutions. Last year, Texas A&M, the entire Texas A&M University system in Texas, which is about 62,000 students, they went into a single rate model as well. And what they're doing is they have a single rate depending on the student's major. Meaning that if you're an education major, you pay one rate, and that's it. If you're an engineering major, you pay one rate, anthropology, etc. And the variance between the rates is probably just about $20, but it varies. And I think what they're doing is compensating for the increased cost of lab equipment for the sciences. What Texas A&M essentially did was, the impetus for Texas A&M is, I don't know that you know this, but Texas A&M is oftentimes listed as the most unaffordable public four-year institution in the nation.
$728
Oh, yeah.
per credit hour.
It's big, okay, and they were getting a lot of publicity nationally because they are, by the way, a very reputable research four-year institution in Texas. They get a lot of heat about the cost of attendance and their fees. For example, at one point they had a single fee that was $1,000 per student. It was a lab fee. So what they did, of course, was their goal wasn't necessarily to make it more affordable. It was to simplify it and capitalize on that to kind of offset some of the publicity they got for being one of the most expensive four-year institutions in the nation. So they say it's working for them. They've only been doing it for 1 year. Something that's happening this year in 2015 is Ohio State University is also saying we're going into a single rate, but their model has yet to really be released. Ohio State University is going to do a single rate model for students who live on campus, and that single rate will not only include tuition fees, but it will also include meal plans and room for their students. And then Ohio State University is going to guarantee that single rate for 4 entire years, so long as the student keeps coming. But they hadn't yet released their model. So that's kind of the homework on the single rate model. Again, the rate 170 would cover all general fees and tuition. The rate 180 would also eliminate any other fees because it would also recoup the $277,000 that we get from other course-specific registration fees. Every time a student wants a transcript fee, we charge a fee. Every time a student wants to make a payment plan, we may charge them a fee. So going to 180 will eliminate every single fee for all students. So that's the single rate model in a nutshell, the history on its evolution since 2001.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes, sir.